That's right. Welcome to the Hill with the West taking on a bluer hue in a newly reset race. Both presidential campaigns heading to the Rockies and beyond tonight. Former President Donald Trump, who's recommitted to a debate with Vice President Kamala Harris, gets ready to rally in the Big Sky state of Montana. And Harris, with her new running mate, Tim Walz, are going on offense in Arizona and Nevada. Plus, we show you new body cam footage from the assassination attempt on Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania, showing the chaotic moments following the shooting. And some score settling as former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi spars publicly with Biden loyalists over her role in pushing the president out of the race. It all comes as an avalanche of new polling shows Harris with the big mo. The Hill on NewsNation starts now. Good evening. I'm Chris Steyerwald. I'm in for Blake Berman, and we are just a few hours from a big Trump rally in Bozeman, Montana. Now, it's a safe red state, but Trump is there to boost a Republican candidate looking to knock off an incumbent Democrat on the Senate side. At about the same time, Kamala Harris will kick things off in Phoenix, in the swing county of the swing state that may decide the presidential election. And Arizona, which a few weeks ago looked out of reach for Democrats, is very much in play. The Political Insider's Bible, the Cook Political Report, shifted Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia from leans Republican to toss up. But making a play for a border state comes with risk for the woman who Republicans never tire of reminding voters was once the administration's point person on stemming the flow of illegal immigration. Trump just yesterday in his hour-long press conference was on message, at least on this subject.
She has been the worst border czar in history, in the world history. Why is it that millions of people were allowed to come into our country from prisons, from jails, from mental institutions, insane asylums?
Democrats looking to soften the blow in Arizona and on an issue that has dogged Democrats regardless of who's at the top of the ticket.
As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border. As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking.
Now it looks like we'll get to hear the two of them debate it face to face, with Trump backing into a September 10th contest on ABC News after backing out of it last week. Joining us now is California Democratic Congressman John Garamendi. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. Please take a look, if you will, at this new poll. It shows a wide advantage for the former president on the issue of immigration, which is consistently the number two concern for voters, right behind the economy. We see the new ad, and Harris is sticking with tighter restriction on asylum claims at the border. Is it enough for Democrats to hold the line on this issue?
Well, I think she has a very, very good argument to make on the border. This border czar issue is just incorrect. She was given a very specific task of dealing with the Central American countries. She brought about $5 billion into those countries and a very, very significant reduction in the number of asylum seekers leaving those countries. So in that sense, she did what she was supposed to do. Going forward, yeah, immigration is going to be an issue, but frankly, the Republicans and Trump have a very severe problem. The bipartisan bill that was part of that ad that you just showed, border guards, dealing with the necessary processes of those people, also providing ways of shutting down. All of that was in the bipartisan bill. And guess who killed it? Donald Trump, all by his little lonesome, killed that major effort and the billions of dollars that were going to be spent to shore up the border. So he has a vulnerability. When it comes to that debate, I will guarantee you she'll put that right back in front of him and said, why did you kill the bill that could have made a major effort in solving the problem?
Okay, I want you to use your expertise and deep knowledge on the subject to help me unpack what is going on in the wake of President Biden's exit from the race. We have some public finger-pointing among top Democrats. Here's what former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told The New Yorker. I've never been that impressed with his political operation. They won the White House. Bravo. But my concern was this ain't happening. And then top Biden advisor Anita Dunn shot back, telling Politico about the effort to drive Biden out of the race. Clearly, there were leaders of the party who decided to go public and go very public. That gave permission to other people to go public. I know you were one of the staunchest proponents of the president's continued candidacy, but I also know that you're a member of Congress from California. What should we make of this seeming pettiness going on here?
It is so yesterday. It is so of no importance today going forward. It's of little value between the two of them. Well, they can have their go at it. But the reality is it's about tomorrow. It is about the fact that we have an extraordinary candidate for president. She's proving herself every single day. And the vice presidential candidate is wonderful in so many ways. Patty and I served with he and his wife. They are exceptional people. This tit for tat back and forth is of no purpose going forward.
Okay, Congressman, you are known for stepping up and answering questions from the press. Vice President Harris, not so much. Your nominee answered reporters' questions for really the first time since she's been the nominee on Thursday, but only briefly, just for a couple minutes. She indicated she'd be doing an interview by the end of the month. 3 weeks? That is a long time to wait. Is it a mistake? Does she raise the stakes so high for the interview the longer that she waits to sit down and answer questions?
Oh, I've been around a long, long time. The press wants to do this, and the press is now ramping up the pressure on her to answer. But let's take a look at how long she's actually been a presidential candidate. I don't think it's 3 full weeks at this point. And she has been extraordinarily busy. Consider she wrapped up the nomination. She got the delegates to vote ahead of the convention. Convention's coming down. They're putting that together. She chose her vice president, a marvelous and terrific pick, and she's out campaigning. Yes, you've got to feed the press. If you don't feed the press, they're going to eat you. So she will do that. Will it be the end of the month? No. No, because the press, you and others, are going to do exactly what you just did, which is, hey, come and talk to us. And she will, and she should. And
we're kind of the worst like that. We're kind of the worst like that.
No, you're not. It's your business. You should do it.
I appreciate it. Congressman, you told your constituents about your recent diagnosis with multiple myeloma, a rare form of blood cancer. We're all here praying for you, hoping for your speedy recovery. How are you doing?
Very, very well. The treatment seems to be working. No side effects. I'm healthy in every other way, and I'm going to kill these damn little critters that are swimming in my blood. End of the story.
Okay, well, we're definitely rooting for that. We appreciate you. All right, if you were from Hercules, you would know him already. But if you don't, there he is, Congressman John Garamendi. We thank you. Okay.
You got it. Thank you.
Okay, say hi to our panel, because joining us today is your friend and mine, Tia Mitchell. She is the Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Chris Hahn, NewsNation political contributor and former aide to Chuck Schumer. You all know who Chuck Schumer is. He's a pretty big deal. Nan Hayworth, also a pretty big deal, former Republican congresswoman from New York. And our friend Domenico Montanaro, senior political editor and correspondent for NPR. All right, Domenico, what is up with the Nancy Pelosi victory lap, the Anita Dunn, the back and forth? What is this?
First, I'm waiting for your new Sunday show, Feed the Press, on NewsNation.
Feed the Press will eat you. I like that.
There you go.
Pretty good.
I think that he's probably right that to the general public, it really doesn't matter all that much. This is a lot of inside baseball, but it's really interesting inside baseball, right? I mean, the fact is, I remember when I wrote my story about Biden dropping out, I said, apparently the Almighty has come down and told Joe Biden to drop out, or it was Nancy Pelosi, right? Because she clearly has the kind of sway in Washington that few others do. And this was Joe Biden's decision. Nobody could actually force him to do it. There was no mechanism for the Democratic Party to push him out. But at the end of the day, enough people were able to get into Biden's ear to show him what the polling results were and to finally convince him that this wasn't happening.
And normal people don't need to care about this. I'm sorry to make them pay attention to it. But the point of contention was Donnellan, who was the chief political advisor to President Biden. He's out, and Jen O'Malley Dillon, the campaign manager, seems to be having the way. Any indication of unhappiness inside the campaign?
You know, what's interesting about the Harris campaign is there's a lot of layers now, and I'm going to be really interested to see how this winds up shaking out within the next 90 days. I mean, there's not a lot of time until people start voting. It's far less than the 90 days. Mid-September or so, we're going to start seeing people in early voting states going to the ballot or sending mail in. And you have all these new Obama people that are kind of involved. Right now, I don't want to say it's a honeymoon period. I say it's more like the liquid Jello phase, where we're waiting for it to consolidate, and we're starting to see people kind of move toward that. But what winds up happening when things, or if things, don't continue to go as well as they are? That's when you start to hear these stories of backbiting. Everyone loves you when you're winning.
Yes, Tia. The press loves you when you talk to us.
Yes.
We want people to talk to us. And I heard John Garamendi, who has the experience to know, telling his party's nominee, don't wait too long. If you wait too long, you just ramp up the pressure. But Kamala Harris, I know one thing for sure. When she was running for president, she was not good at the interview. And the interview is a special skill set that some politicians have and some politicians don't. Frame this out for us. What's the situation?
So I think the first thing is, if she wanted to, she would, right? Yeah. So the fact that she hasn't done a major interview, the fact that she hasn't done a sit-down, more formal press conference just means that she and her campaign have decided not to do one right now. But again, the pressure's starting to ramp up. Yes, us media folks, once you take too long, quite frankly, the institutional media will start to turn on you a little bit, and she doesn't want that. But in her defense, I think her and her team believe that the timing has not been right. I also think, to your point, she has been vice president for almost 4 years now. She's better than she was when she ran for president in a lot of ways, not just at the interviews, but being on the stage, being out front. She's a lot stronger than she was. So I think she'll be fine once she does it. It's just when they decide it's time. But, and I'm not sure I think they're going to do something going into the DNC. I think they'll do at least one major thing going into the DNC.
And are you available?
Absolutely.
Talk to a swing state, a well-respected swing state journalist, Dr. Tia. Chris, the immigration issue is so tough for Democrats because there is a divide there. And when we think about a state like Arizona, you have two core constituencies. You got a bunch of suburban voters in places like Scottsdale, people on the north and northeast side of Phoenix who want more restrictions on immigration. But then you also have a lot of Hispanic voters, younger voters who are concerned about a crackdown and aren't happy with that. How does she thread the needle?
So one of my former bosses that's not in my formal intro is a guy named Tom Suozzi.
Oh, yeah,
just got reelected to his old House seat. And he leaned into the issue. He said, look, we put together a plan that would have been more comprehensive, not everything everybody wanted, but it had a lot. It had a lot of border security. It had a lot of money for Border Patrol. It had a change in the asylum rules that made it easier to process them and deal with it quickly rather than waiting years. And Trump blocked it. He leaned in on that. It worked for him. It will work for her. I also believe that she doesn't have to win everybody in this issue. I don't think it's going to be a major decider among the 100,000 or so Americans that are going to decide this election. But if it's an issue for some of them, and it's still an issue for them, she's got to lean into it a little bit and pick off some of them so that she doesn't lose them all.
Congresswoman, how much should the Republican argument be on immigration? Where do you put it in the issue stack?
Well, it consistently tests very importantly among diverse communities. And to Chris's point, with all due respect, it was all executive action, a differential in executive action between what President Trump did and what President Biden did. And now, of course, Vice President Harris does take the aura of that made all the difference between a much more controlled border situation and an uncontrolled one. I agree Congress needs to act. There were many unacceptable parts of that bill for congressional Republicans. They weren't waiting for Trump's thumbs up, but it was executive action that made the difference, and that's the failure now.
We will revisit all of this and more, I promise. There will be time. There will be time. There will be moments for moments. But we should say We're also following some breaking news tonight. Dramatic video captured just hours ago as a plane spiraled from the sky and crashed into a residential neighborhood in Brazil. It was a domestic flight carrying at least 61 people, 57 passengers and 4 crew members. The airline Vopas said the plane was headed for Sao Paulo's international airport. The president of Brazil was briefed on the crash, saying it appears, quote, all passengers have died. There's no indication at this time that there were any Americans on the flight, but we will bring you any updates as they happen. Okay, coming up, new footage of the assassination attempt against Donald Trump. Local police releasing body camera footage. So what exactly went wrong, and what is being done to prevent it from happening again? We'll talk to a former agent from the FBI and CIA. Plus, the former president just complicated the abortion debate again, and Democrats are ready to pounce. Also, he has the most popular podcast, more than 17 million subscribers, many of them MAGA men. So where does Joe Rogan stand on the 2024 election? It may matter more than you think. We'll talk about it when The Hill on NewsNation returns. Welcome back to The Hill on NewsNation. We're learning more about the moments leading up to the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. Newly released body cam video shows local law enforcement officers attempting in vain to get on the roof of the warehouse where the gunman, Thomas Crooks, was positioned, and how the blame game began the moment after a Secret Service sniper took out the would-be assassin.
I told them they need to post the guys over here. I told them that the Secret Service. I told them that Tuesday.
The video is being reviewed by the Secret Service. So let's bring in NewsNation national security contributor Tracy Walder. Tracy, how are you? Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
From what we heard on the body cam video, Secret Service was advised to secure the warehouse. Why do you think there was this lack of communication between local law enforcement and the Secret Service?
So there's a couple reasons. I think the first reason is, one, we know that there were technical difficulties going on. Text messages weren't going through, walkie-talkie messages weren't going through. So that's problem number one. But we really have to start at the beginning. Really, Secret Service took control of that immediate perimeter, and then local law enforcement, Butler Police Department, took control of the outside perimeter. And I think that the right hand wasn't talking to the left hand, and it sounds to me like the Secret Service asked them to secure the building, and they may not have had the manpower necessarily to do so, and one thought that the other was securing it.
Okay, and so that's why the Secret Service didn't remove Trump from the stage or take some other action, because that communication lapsed. Go ahead.
So in my opinion, and I've actually said this really from day one, now that we know that there were so many issues, it is of my opinion that Trump, in all honesty, should have never taken the stage. There were too many issues, quite frankly, and I don't think he ever should have been allowed to take the stage.
Now, the director of the Secret Service resigned amid pressure and bipartisan pressure. But will we see actual change here and not just a scapegoating where you get rid of one person but things don't change? Secret Service has had a lot of problems for quite a while. What do you think the outlook for real change in the agency is?
Look, I'll be honest, I'm not the most optimistic person in the world. That's just who I am by nature. But I actually do think we may see some change here, because what happened, in my opinion, was cataclysmic for them. I look at this like I look at 9/11 in terms of intelligence failures. And after we had the 9/11 commission, things did get better between the CIA and law enforcement. So my hope is that communication will get better. My hope is that we also have some kind of a federal communication system that all of them can communicate on in events like this.
Okay, changing topics, looking at the foreign threat situation. Tensions are rising in the Middle East, and so I want to ask you about Iran. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that Tehran is in better position to advance its nuclear arms program. The assessment from U.S. intelligence agencies says that Iran isn't building a nuclear device yet. How do you assess this threat?
So I actually worked weapons of mass destruction at the CIA, and in my opinion, I think that they're actually pretty close. We know right now that they are about 60 to 70% capable of enriching uranium, which is what they need. Their centrifuges are at 90% of operational capability. So the reality is quite frankly, if they wanted to be, which I don't know if they want to be, but if they wanted to be, they're just a few months away, which is very disturbing.
Tracy Walter, we thank you for your time. Have a good Friday.
Thank you, too.
Congresswoman, there's a little bit of, we've been hearing about Iran being close to having a nuclear device for now a decade, it seems like.
Yes.
From your perch, and you know more than anybody else on this panel does because you got the briefings and you were in there. How do you read this?
The chief. I've certainly been in Israel. 2011, we spoke with the IDF, with the prime minister, who was then Netanyahu and is today. And Iran has always been our chief antagonist, if you will, in terms of terror risk, and Israel's. The primary difference between the previous administration, the Trump administration, and the Biden administration is that the Trump administration had sanctions on Iran that prevented cash flows in various ways. Mm-hmm. The Biden administration took those sanctions away, mm-hmm. and that meant that Iran had access to major cash flows in a lot of forms, billions and billions of dollars, and they have put that toward terror, Hamas, Hezbollah, all of their proxies, and now this nuclear threat. We have to take it seriously. We have to coordinate with Israel. This shouldn't be a political issue, but we do have to acknowledge that crippling sanctions that have economic impact have been effective, and we need to return to that.
Chris, there's lots of Democrats who want to be tough on Iran. That's not. It's not like there are no Democrats who want to be tough on Iran, but it's a tricky political dismount for any Democratic administration. Mm-hmm. How does the new vice president, how does the new presidential nominee navigate this?
Well, you would tell me foreign policy is never really an issue in a presidential election. This kind of foreign policy will not be an issue unless they somehow get a nuclear bomb between now and November, right? Then, of course, it would be a major issue. So I would suggest to her that she should not waste too much time on it, but to the extent that she does, talk about being tough on Iran and making sure that they are not going to get that capability. And that's basically all she's got to do.
There we go. There's still much more ahead on the Hill. Will abortion be a big factor in the election? Yes, of course. Donald Trump, in his press conference yesterday, says it won't. That's probably not true. We'll get the panel's reaction. And how do voters see Trump and Harris? Who's patriotic? Who's intelligent? Who cares about voters like them? We'll break it all down with our wonderful panel when the Hill returns.
I think that abortion has become much less of an issue. It's a very small, I think it's actually going to be a very small issue. What I've done is I've done what every Democrat and every Republican wanted to have done, and we brought that issue back to the states.
Welcome back to the Hill on NewsNation. That was former President Donald Trump during his Thursday press conference, arguing that abortion will not be a big factor in November. In the same press conference, Trump also said that he's open to banning the abortion pill, mifepristone, which I will mispronounce several different ways during this show, which contradicts what he said at his presidential debate against President Biden in June.
The Supreme Court just approved the abortion pill, and I agree with their decision to have done that, and I will not block it.
The former president also keeping mum about how he'll vote on a ballot measure in his home state of Florida, seeking to reverse Florida's abortion ban after 6 weeks. Tia, obviously, Donald Trump knows that abortion is going to be a huge issue. And it may not put Florida in play, but when we look at the swing states, when we look across the board, we see the degree of Democratic turnout. For example, in Georgia, I don't know that Raphael Warnock would still be a United States senator if it wasn't for this issue.
Yeah, I mean, in Georgia, there's a 6-week abortion ban, and then states like Florida followed suit. For women, I think what Donald Trump is not acknowledging is that for women, it's not just about abortion. Mm-hmm. It's about the right to choose. It's about fertility. For some women who know someone who's had to have a pregnancy terminated for medical reasons, it's literally about life or death. And that's easy for Republicans or people who oppose abortion to dismiss as, exaggerations or just one-off cases. But women who talk to other women know that these procedures are way more common than I think a lot of people want to admit, and therefore it is top of mind. Now, is it the number one issue? Not necessarily. At the end of the day, the pocketbook issues, we know that's going to be the number one factor, but at the end of the day, again, it is not just abortion, it's fertility, it's IVF, it's family planning, it's the right to choose, which is going to be a major issue this election.
Domenico, it would obviously be very helpful to Republicans if they could pick a message and stick to it on this subject, whatever it was, even if it was one that was unpopular with some portion. It's the moving of it, and we saw that reinforced with J.D. Vance, right? The inclusion of J.D. Vance on the ticket and the childless cat ladies and his prior statements about abortion. I know this is what every Republican has wanted for years. Is there any way that they can get Donald Trump to a message that he can stick with?
The answer is no.
Yeah.
Donald Trump's going to talk about what he wants to talk about, and that's everything under the sun and not always backed up with facts, obviously. And one thing I have to say, he said in that the abortion's a small issue and it's something everyone wanted. Just those two are lies, right? And I went down this rabbit hole last night and into today, and I'm not done with it, going through the transcript of the entire thing he said yesterday, because it struck me that this is more bizarre than what we usually hear for the number of things that Trump says. And I've got 5 pages left on it, and there's 150 lies that I was able to, with a team of other people, to look at and say, here's everything that he said that wasn't correct or inaccurate. I mean, that's more than 2 lies a minute, right? And this is him trying to then corral the message to say we're going to be more focused. And because reporters are there asking him questions, not necessarily even hard questions, he's going in a lot of different directions. And when he does that, he's backing it up with things that aren't necessarily always true.
Congresswoman, there are a lot of ways that Republicans could have gone on this issue. A lot of places to go. How would you advise your party to talk about this? What would you tell Donald Trump, or what have you told Donald Trump? What should he and what should Republicans be saying?
I've certainly spoken among Republicans. I haven't had a personal conversation with President Trump about this, although I would certainly be happy to. I agree with Tia. This is a deeply intimate issue of bodily autonomy for women. The Supreme Court decision in Dobbs was the correct Supreme Court decision, and to Domenico's point, I think what President Trump was alluding to, although not correctly stated, was that on the Supreme Court, even Justice Ginsburg had said that the Roe versus Wade decision was not a perfect constitutional decision. But the political challenge for Republicans, I think, is this. Number one, as you said, Chris, they need a consistent message. And President Trump does have part of a great message in that he said it is now up to the states. That's a valid point. But I think, they have to have a heart for the fact that women in Georgia hear what folks in Oklahoma are doing on a Republican ticket, and they say, if I elect enough Republicans, same in New York, if I elect enough Republicans, they are going to change things in a way that I don't like, and it's a deeply emotional issue.
Chris, the polling is really clear and consistent on abortion.
Yeah.
America is a pro-choice country in the first trimester and a pro-life country after that. And we've polled it every way that we can, and it's just consistent. Is there a danger here for Democrats that as Republicans look for ways to fight back, they're going to say Democrats want no restrictions, they want late term, they want no restrictions on abortion.
No, I think people are starting to wise up to that demagoguery around late-term abortions. People who have them are not doing them for birth control reason. They're doing it for the health of the mother, right? A very serious problem has occurred, and it is a tragedy when that happens. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a horrible issue for Trump. I think he's wishful thinking, trying to talk it away, but it will matter in this election, especially when you're talking about maybe 200,000 people going to make up their mind here. You got to think some of those people are coming out to vote on this issue.
Yeah, motivate and persuade. Coming up, we're going to play the word association game. What words and phrases do voters associate with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris? We'll break it down next.
In a race like no other, trust a network like no other with balanced coverage with respect for all Americans. NewsNation brings you the Democratic National Convention Monday, August 19th. NewsNation, news for all America.
Poll shows Vice President Harris has opened up a slight lead over former President Donald Trump. But what may be more interesting is what the poll tells us about perceptions of the two candidates. So let's break it down. Here you go. Why don't you look here and see the top line in this poll? And as you can see, Kamala Harris in July up over Donald Trump at the end of July. And she's nudged it up, or Trump sunk 1 point. And notable there, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. sinking down to 4%, the bear vote coming out against him. But here's what I care about in this. The top line's interesting, but what I care about in this poll that matters so much to who's going to win this election is what are the ideas and concepts that people associate with these two candidates? How do people see? So here are, and this is a good poll. This is not my favorite poll. I'm sorry, Ipsos. It's not my favorite poll, but it's a good poll and methodologically sound. So what are the words and phrases most associated with Donald Trump to voters? Weird. Okay. By 14 points. All right. Fine. Makes sense. Patriot by 12 points. Brave by 7 points over the same words for Kamala Harris. Look at Kamala Harris, though. What are you seeing here? Moral by 19 points. Intelligent by 8 points. And I want you to pay attention to this last phrase, cares about people like you. Do you know who has won every presidential election in the modern era? It is the candidate that wins on the question of whether you care about people like you. Who won that question in 2016? We knew Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate because she managed to lose on the question of cares about people like me to the host of The Celebrity Apprentice. And if you can do that, you've really got problems. But of course, this is where Barack Obama wiped out Mitt Romney, did better than John McCain. And in recent, let's say this century, no candidate that wins on that question loses the election because ultimately voters don't care as persuadable voters. If you care a lot about ideology, if you're deeply into policy, you're not a persuadable voter. You're already in one team or the other. For the third of the country that swings from sometimes voting Democratic but usually Republican to sometimes voting Republican but usually Democratic, that governing third of the country, they're going on, this year we call it vibes, but they're going on the judgment that they're making about the character of the person. And the thing that they most want to know is that they care about people like them. So that is this great strength for Kamala Harris. Here's a question. And Tia, I want to start with you again. We have known about Kamala Harris for a long time. She was a famous senator. She famously questioned Brett Kavanaugh. She's been around. But for these kind of voters we're talking about, she's still being defined.
Absolutely.
She's still in the process of being defined. That's good if she's there, but 6 points isn't enough. She shouldn't be comfortable at that point, and she also shouldn't be comfortable that Trump has such an edge on the question of patriot.
Well, I would push back on the patriot thing because that's such a big part of his MAGA brand, the America First brand. You know, patriot is almost kind of a nickname that Donald Trump supporters give to him. He's such a patriot. You know, that's just part of the MAGA branding.
First thing they're going to say when they're asked.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm not as concerned about that. But I do think, you know, again, Donald Trump, he's been convicted of felonies. He's been accused of not only not speaking well of women, but, you know, bringing physical harm to women. he's facing other felony charges. So you would think, in comparison, Kamala Harris would want to rank much higher on some of these metrics. And that's where, but the other thing is, her team will say she's been a candidate for 3 weeks. People have only taken her seriously as the potential future top of the ticket, potential future president for 3 weeks. So she has a lot of room to grow as people pay attention and make decisions on how they feel about her.
Does Tim Walz help, cares about people like you? He seems like he's like he's going to bring hot dish to your to your church supper.
I don't know, whether or not, first of all, in this kind of polling, whether or not so many people have seen Tim Walz that now all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, this was before that. It wouldn't have had an effect on
and
this.
Maybe I think he rounds the edges a little bit of someone like Kamala Harris. She's from California. He's from the Midwest. He's of the Midwest. They need the blue wall, right? So for having someone like that, and he's at his speech, he says, "Hey, I see all you old white guys out there." He called that out, right? And he's speaking exactly to them. And I think the way that he talks about it's hard to say Tim Walz doesn't seem like a nice guy, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it rounds the edges of somebody who might be seen as a tough prosecutor. The thing that I thought was interesting, in addition to the cares about people like you, is people saying net positive on her being intelligent, because that is something Donald Trump continues to say about Kamala Harris, that she's not smart, that she's dumb, that she's low IQ. And he continues to have this problem with black women in particular who oppose him or challenge him. And the more he's going to do that, I think it's really difficult to go after. I've said from the beginning of this that the Republican Party is going to have a very difficult time in figuring out how to frame a black woman and talk about her, because they've had all these problems in being able to talk, in a way that's seen as appropriate, calling her a DEI candidate, saying she's low IQ. And when that many people are saying, actually don't agree with that, that's a problem for Donald Trump.
Chris Hahn, once upon a time, Democrats were very upset about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It was a potentially big problem. And now, and you look at that poll, they're loving him. They're loving him.
Yeah.
You know who else is loving him? Joe Rogan. He's the biggest podcaster.
Joe Rogan, biggest podcaster, 11 million listeners. Much bigger than my podcast.
Much bigger than the aggressive progressive.
Yes.
But tune in. So he didn't endorse RFK Jr. He said he'd be voting for him because he digs it, and I guess it's the bear carcasses that does it.
Going to really help him in California.
And here's how Donald Trump responded. It will be interesting to see how loudly Joe Rogan gets booed next time he enters the UFC ring, MAGA 2024. Do you agree that RFK is a much bigger problem for Trump now than he is for Democrats?
Yes, because first of all, I've always said he was weird. Talk about weird. He's weird. I say it from personal experience. So he's a strange guy who has strange ideas, and it's a bigger problem for Trump because a lot of his supporters, especially on the anti-vax stuff, share those ideas.
Congresswoman, should Donald Trump pick a fight with Joe Rogan, or should he let this go by?
I wouldn't pick a fight with Joe Rogan. I would. President Trump has a remarkable ability to be charming, to be warm. I've witnessed it firsthand among folks, diverse audiences. I think the cares about you metric.
Yep.
I think the Republicans and the Trump campaign can really dig into that. We had everyday Americans highlighted every day, but the last one of the Republican National Convention. That's something, President Trump doesn't lack in any of these ways.
It was a great convention till that last day. That last day was
the highlight was different.
The last block, you two.
The highlight was different.
Coming up,
it was rough.
Richard Nixon's last moments in the White House. On this day, 50 years ago, delivering one final message to his staff. Does it still resonate? When the Hill returns.
Pray with me, Steinerwald.
Welcome back to the Hill on NewsNation. 50 years ago on this day, President Richard Milhous Nixon said farewell to his White House staff and advisors with this advice, just hours before his resignation took effect.
Always give your best. Never get discouraged. Never be petty. always remember, others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them. And then you destroy yourself.
Fairly insightful commentary about his own career and his own life from the soon-to-be former president.
Ironic.
Following the address, Vice President Gerald Ford and his wife escorted Nixon and his wife Pat to the helicopter as they left the White House for the last time as President and First Lady. What has been, well, I was going to ask you what has been the lasting political impact, but Congresswoman, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah.
It was not a Chinese philosopher who said, "May you live in interesting times." Right. It was not. That was something we made up 100 years ago and tried to make it sound cooler by saying it was ancient. But we have lived in extraordinarily interesting times now, haven't we?
And I watched that speech live, by the way.
And so I
think I'm the only one who was live for it.
You know, I grew up in a very stable political order, and I think, you know, a lot of us did, in which a post-Watergate world, a stable political universe in which you could tell us, if you could tell us who was going to win 2 counties in Ohio and Florida, we could pretty much tell you who was going to win the presidency. We had stable parties, stable politics. Things are not stable anymore. We live in a time that is very similar. It feels very similar to those moments 50 years ago.
It does. And I think about it. I contemplate it a lot. I think one of the underlying, you were just referring when we were offline to tectonic plates. One of the foundational challenges we have is that we have spent the patrimony of the American century. We had hegemonic power after World War II, hegemonic wealth. And sadly, we have spent it down. And once the money runs out, love tends to be harder to find. I hope we will get back to it, though.
You think you're going to hear about hegemonic patrimony if you're watching Home Shopping Network? No. Before we say goodbye, a quick Olympic update. The U.S. holds a dominant lead in the medal count with 111.
Because we're the hegemons.
They are now tied with China in gold medals. And before we go, make sure that you will join Tia and me, because she'll be on the panel. She has to do double duty this week. On the Hill Sunday, we'll have the latest on the race for the White House, and we'll talk with Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma as Vice President Harris surges in the polls. Where do Republicans go from here? When's it happen? This Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Panel, we thank you for being with us. And thank you all for watching The Hill on NewsNation. Set your DVR to watch us at 6 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back on Monday. On Balance with Leland Vittert starts right now.